everybody, and welcome to the Universal Court of Truth. We today, us, myself, one half of your hosts, Hunter,
The other half of your host, Mary.
are discussing She-Hulk episode 8, Ribbit and Rip It. Look at me go. Um, those one to two of you who watch the video um, may be noticing that I am not wearing my normal court attire, and that is because I literally just walked back into my apartment from the first day of New York City Comic Con, and I thank you. Mary is giving me
Don't wear
applause.
a press badge. He's
I know. Look, I forgot to take it off. But anyway, I say that to say I'm very tired. So, if anything I say makes no sense, if I forget little details, please don't hold it against me. Um, that yeah, didn't sleep a lot, busy day. So, luckily, Mary is the smart one and did sleep, and so Mary gets to do a bunch of talking as well. Um, Speaking of that, let's address the lawyer in the room, not married. That was a vague.
in the court, in
Yeah.
the
Let's
court of.
let's back up on that. Let's address the vigilante in the room.
Who is that? Oh, you mean in like the
Oh
figured?
my god,
It's okay.
is literally the one guy that we've
Okay.
been talking about. Yeah, we don't need to start with the Daredevil discussion per se, but let's just say this is the Daredevil. This is forever going to be known as She-Hulk's Daredevil episode. No matter how good it was, regardless of the fact that Daredevil was in it. Um, so Mary, please tell us your general thoughts, ideas, potential apprehensions, no apprehensions, of the Daredevil episode of She-Hulk. What'd you think? Thoughts?
It was really great. I mean, I think everybody waiting for Daredevil like assumed it would be a great episode just because of him. And like he was great, like no doubt. I have. It's been years since I watched the Netflix show, so I wasn't like sitting around like really obsessing about it like some people seem to, but he was great and he's better than I remembered from that. So all props to Charlie Cox and how they did Daredevil in this. I thought everything else about the episode was also fantastic though. I thought like Leapfrog was really hilarious. Luke Jacobson wasn't his first appearance obviously, but I felt like he really was extra funny in this. And then I thought the ending really hit hard for me. I remember like watching it the first time and I was just like, oh shit. Like, and I think part of that was the contrast of we had a very fun, very funny episode and then like some darker shit happened. So I thought like all around it was just a really great episode. And obviously Daredevil's gonna steal the show no matter what, which is fine. But I think he wasn't the only thing that made it great. He didn't have to
Yeah,
change it for everyone else. Yeah.
I fully agree with that. Um, I don't watch like the Netflix Daredevil like all the time. I think I've seen it all the way through like twice. I do very much love it and have been very much waiting for Charlie Cox to come back. And it almost felt like a warm blanket, like a childhood blankie, like I found it after all these years, and then I hugged it, and I was like, yeah, that is as nice as I remember, like like
That's
uh,
fair. I guess.
yeah, something like that. But it was cool getting to see. I think it's very clear that Charlie Cox loves playing Daredevil, and I think that comes through in his performance, which is part of why it's so fun to watch him because you can just tell that like he's loving every second of it. Which is great. I mean, I think that a lot of the great comic book castings have that. I think like Robert Downey Jr. loved playing Tony Stark, and you could tell Hugh Jackman loved playing Wolverine, and you could tell. Um,
Deadpool.
yeah, Ryan Reynolds loves playing. Yeah, like you can tell. But Daredevil is such a funny character to like have fun with because he has a reputation of being so like dark and dreary, and he's not that. I mean, we've talked about this a million times. Like he's an onion with many layers in the comics. And it for me, I had a really good time seeing Charlie Cox have a good time playing a version of Daredevil that was still very much like his Daredevil, like I remembered it, but also was having fun and making jokes and had like playful banter, and yeah, it was nice. It was fun to see him laugh and smile like in costume fighting. It was just it was good. It was really great. And him and Tatiana Maslany had great chemistry, like really good.
I don't feel like I watch many things and even like have that conscious thought, like, oh, these people have great chemistry. But I was like watching, like, Jesus Christ, like this is phenomenal. Like, I don't know if they just happen to have that as actors,
I
great,
remember
or if they had to work really hard for that. Either way, like they nailed it.
I
Oh,
remember at D23 during an interview, Charlie briefly mentioned that he felt like him and Tatiana had really good chemistry on set, and he made some comment along the lines of like, "Oh, I don't know, maybe that was just me, maybe I imagined it." And watching this episode, I was like, "No, no, he's right. They had really good. They really vibed with each other. I feel like they both really understood the assignment." But yeah, I mean, it is this version of Daredevil reminds me of like Kingpin coming back in Hawkeye, and then it's still very much in the way that still very much felt like Vincent D'Onofrio's take on Wilson Fisk, but he's more comic book accurate in the sense that he can like throw a man through a wall and like take an explosive to the tummy and like keep trucking. It's like as much as I love the Netflix Daredevil, he was never doing acrobatics to the degree that we saw Daredevil do acrobatics in this. Um, whether that was a budget thing or creative choice or whatever, that was like right off the bat when you see him in the suit for the first time. He's doing like CGI acrobatics, which I don't mind the CGI at all. I actually think it looked a lot better in the episode than it did in that like ET clip they released ahead of time where the lighting was really weird and it was like more obvious that it was CGI. And I digress. Yeah, I think that it was cool, and I also think that I'm just rambling about Daredevil really quick, so I can let you take it from there. I also think that I like that the episode knew, like, it knew what people were expecting, and it knew the version of Daredevil it like the viewers thought they were gonna get potentially. I mean, they do like the whole gag where they put him in a hallway and he starts doing the hallway fight, like the like that he always does, and then She-Hulk. I knew she was gonna come crashing to the roof. I knew that was gonna happen. Um, yeah, they play the Netflix Daredevil theme for like a brief second in the same way they've been playing like the '90s X-Men theme, which was really cool. So all of that, like they very much know that you want it. Matt Murdock gets like the big grand entrance into the courtroom. Like the camera stays on him when he comes through the door. Like they know. They know that people were they gave us time to clap. Like that's what they were doing. Um which
yeah.
was
I liked how his like entrance, right, was like relatively unceremonious. Like, I mean, they definitely lingered and it was like a dramatic courtroom entrance, but like in context of like the show as a whole, he didn't enter as Daredevil. He didn't like do anything crazy. He just walked into court and made like a bad joke, but was fun in context. So I really like that. I had kind of forgotten about No Way Home and that he was like briefly in it. In my mind, for so long, I was like, this is the first time he's been in the MCU. Not technically correct. First time Daredevil has, though.
yeah.
But first time we've seen him do much else other than like Catch a Brick or whatnot. I did not
Yeah.
see the more fun stuff version of No Way Home, so I don't know how much else he got in that.
Like he has one extra scene that is like 2 or 3 minutes long where they reveal that he has taken Happy on as a client because Happy's actually in more legal trouble than Peter because he's like tied to all this Stark stuff. Um, and he's just there's just a brief scene where he's like advising Happy in some sort of legal meeting, and he just keeps telling Happy he needs to stop sweating so much, and that's just like that's it. That's the only extra. There is an extra Matt Murdock scene, but it's very short and it's really not that important.
Yeah, but I agree with how Kingpin and now Daredevil feel a little bit more comic accurate while not going crazy in a different direction because there's I don't like the word goofy, but there's like certain elements that you see in the comics that we haven't necessarily seen as much focus on in live action and sort of these like over the top, silly or goofy aspects, whether it's acrobatics or being able to throw someone through a wall for like no real reason. Like
Yeah.
I think Marvel and the MCU, and I'm even including like Netflix stuff and all this, early on, I think they kind of I don't know if thrived is the right word, but they purposely made things a bit more realistic.
Hmm.
Obviously, where you can go, and I think that worked for a long time. And I think people are now much more open to
Hmm.
the more comic book, maybe accurate stuff or stuff that's a little bit less like, okay, let's tone it down. And so I think that the MCU introductions of some of these characters that are like canon, not canon, Defenders verse type people um, reflect that, and I think that's really cool. I think that is a very cool statement about Phase Four, which people are confused about because I think it is the one that is saying, "Hey, we're from comics. We're gonna put us back in it," and
Yeah.
I think that's fun. And I think that that probably a good sign. We're gonna see more characters from Netflix shows, maybe others that are going to come in and fit really well in the MCU and fit enough into their past that you can just be like, yeah, sure, it's this character.
Yeah.
But I think it's cool that they're willing to do that. I know there's way too much discussion about like how canon needs to work in live
Yeah.
action. It's like just put characters you like and shit. Like it's not that hard. But so wonderful introduction of Daredevil into the MCU and a bit more extended Matt Murdock, obviously. I thought they nailed it. He was hilarious. He really was. I mean, just like
He's so good. Like
he was so good. He was
it's
so
so
good.
hard to not just say that repeatedly, and it's been said to death. Obviously, like there's a reason that Kevin Feige watched the Daredevil show on Netflix and was like, we can't we can't recast, like it has to be him. And he wants to do it, like, because he is just so good as Matt Murdock. It's insane.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And to your point about the tone, I mean, I couldn't agree more. I think a really good, like, living example that we might have also brought up in the past, within the MCU, is how they've handled Thor, like his movies, and how they've changed, and how in 2011, they were saying, we're not gods. We are, like, it's just magic is just science you don't understand yet. And then cut to X amount of years later, the fourth Thor movie. It's literally based around the fact that they're gods who wield magic, and they're just like not afraid to say that. And I also think it's funny that when the MCU started in like 2008, that was the, like, in the heart of the era of, we need to make superhero adaptations gritty. That was, like, The Dark Knight came out that same year, is a good example of that. And how even at Marvel's grittiest, they were still like the light ones, like the lighter comic booky ones. Even in Phase One, it was like, yeah, well, you've seen that Iron Man movie. That's a real lighthearted, like, romp. And I don't know. I do think it's funny how perception of comic book films have changed over the years, and I love it because I've always hoped. I was never into the gritty. I mean, obviously it works better with certain characters, but I love seeing Daredevil just like hop his way through a collapsing parking garage and then like land on a car and be like, my ass remains unwhooped. I'm just like, hell yeah. So
yeah. I do think there's something to be said for we have seen a lot of grittier takes, like you said. So I think it's easier to appreciate less gritty takes. And I kind of wonder, like, had we gone, I don't know, this Daredevil or whatever, or this Thor, our most recent Thor, like originally, like how that would have played out at all. And if we had kind of reversed it and we went grittier with Thor, if people would love him. Now, it's just such an interesting,
yeah.
because I mean, I'm on the same page as you, but I remember early on in my MCU journey, Being like, I had the thought, like, this is so successful. One, obviously, the crossovers, that was very revolutionary at the time, but then it felt relatively down to earth compared to some other types of comic book movies you were seeing at the time. And it still had aliens and Loki and like a cube, like, so it wasn't anything like
Yeah.
historical fiction, but like it was, it felt a bit more grounded. And now it's like, I don't really want that. I'm very happy with the stuff going off the wall, but yeah, it's been a journey for the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and now we have Daredevil again.
Now we have Daredevil, and not only do we have Daredevil, I would like to think that I wonder if they chose the yellow suit, yellow red suit, because they were like, it's gonna be a lighter hearted version of the same character. So like we'll do the Netflix suit, but we'll do the yellow because then that's like a little cheerier. I mean, the comic book origin for the it's interesting because the comic book version, like origin for him wearing yellow and red as his like original. For anyone who doesn't know, that like the design that you just saw in She-Hulk is like his first ever comic book design when he was introduced in the comics. It was the yellow and red. It wasn't all red. It wasn't all black. That the all black suit wasn't even introduced until Frank Miller redid his origin in like the 80s. So like OG Daredevil wore yellow and red, and not a lot of people know that because I think it only lasted 7 issues before they changed it, and then they like never went back. Um, but the reason for him wearing yellow and red in the comics was because those were the colors of his dad's like boxing. I don't want to say uniform because shorts and like coat or whatever. That was like his dad's theme, which you can see in the Daredevil Netflix show. His dad does wear yellow and red still. And the idea was that if he was going to be a superhero, in like the memory of his dad, he was going to wear the same colors as his dad, hence the yellow and red suit. Eventually, they realized it looked way better when he just wore all red, yada yada yada. But in this episode, he kind of hints like Jen makes a joke about him like mustard and ketchup suit or whatever, and he's like, "Oh well, Luke designed it, so take it up with him." And I think that's it, like interesting. Like, I mean, not that he has to reveal his whole past; it could have been his idea, and he just didn't want to say it. I don't think they'll ever dive into that per se. Uh, but I do think it's interesting that within the context of the MCU, he has probably worn this after the red suit. Like it's probably not his first suit design. Um, and I do wonder like where it came from. I guess it doesn't. The more I talk about it, the less it seems to matter. But I do think it's interesting that in the comics there's like a real significance to that suit specifically, and in the MCU it seems like there's no significance at all. It's just kind of like a fun reference, um, which is interesting. Yes, Mary.
My thoughts first, I thought the yellow could kind of, I don't know, symbolize, be a metaphor for the fact that he's like new in the MCU, whether or not his character is brand new, but like kind of just like a symbol of like rebirth a bit, because that was his first suit in the comics. Knows. I did see people talk about how it didn't seem like it came from his dad, but it was based on one line where he said, "Should I tell Luke you said that about the ketchup and mustard?" So I mean, it's still very
Yeah,
much, yeah, could be Daredevil's idea, and then he was just kind of evoking it. But I did see discussion about that as well. Yeah.
interesting. I haven't been on Twitter like at all today.
Were you at New
Aside,
York Comic Con?
I was well, I was live tweeting from the Murphy's Multiverse account, but I was like strictly tweeting out and not looking at any tweets. So I actually have like completely missed the discourse on this episode, which is maybe for the best. Uh,
I feel like it was what I saw, and I wasn't like scouring, but just what I saw on my feed, it was positive. I don't remember seeing anyone being particularly shitty, but maybe I don't like follow.
Yeah, I the only thing I saw was a lot of people I saw a lot of memes about, and this is a good segue because this is the next thing I want to talk about the fact that him and Jen do hook up. Um and a lot of those memes were very funny. It is also I won't lie to you guys. Don't know if they ever hooked up in the comics or not. But Matt Murdock man, for as listen, for as like edgy and broody and yada 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 as Matt Murdock is, that dude, like every time he has like a side, like I don't want to say sidekick, like a partner, like a crime fighting partner, like they always end up hooking up. He hooks up with people all the time. That's like kind of integral to the Daredevil character at this point. That dude has had so many relationships, and every single one of them has ended terribly. And when I say terribly, I mean it's like they die in like a terrible way. Like they like literally get fridged, or like they get possessed by a demon, or they were a demon the whole time and Matt knew that but didn't care, and like so it's also not, I feel like people might watch that and it's like jarring that he sleeps with She-Hulk because people think of them as like they're two separate like Marvel heroes from like different corners of the, but that's actually like standard practice for Daredevil in the comics. He does this all the time. He has no like workplace. I like I
Workplace ethics. Yeah, there's no HR for
there's
Daredevil.
no HR for superheroes. And apparently there's no Sokovia Accords either, but that's a
Oh
whole other
yeah,
conversation.
yeah. Well, I was gonna quickly say, I mean, in the MCU, like notoriously, there's like no sex really. Like, I mean, you've
Yeah.
got Iron Man that like I guess they didn't count that as a sex scene because then Eternals came out and it's like, this is their first sex scene. It's like, what is that? Like, that's not shit
Let me
either.
tell you, that does count. Iron Man does count as a
That's
sex
what I
scene.
think it counts. So I was always
It
pissed. It
does.
was like,
Because
that's,
I went to see, I don't know how old our like fans are. This might blow some minds. But I was 9 years old when I went to see Iron Man on opening night in 2008 with my dad, and he made me close my eyes during
weirdly
the sex
the
scene.
first
So it
time.
has to count as a sex scene, otherwise he did that for
The
nothing.
first time I saw Iron Man, I must have been around about 11. But my dad had rented it on DVD at Blockbuster down the street because he loved doing that. And he was watching it in the basement, and I was just sitting there with him. And that scene, and then I don't know what he reacted to, but the line where Robert Downey Jr. slash Tony Stark says like, "This isn't the worst thing you caught me doing,"
Yeah.
which is like to me still a very clear like masturbation joke, which is great. But like as a kid, my dad was looking over like, "You don't know what that means, do you?" So it's funny. Yeah, I remember that too. But yeah, I mean, so I think my point was, I mean, like sex is relatively foreign in the MCU for whatever reason. And so I think not only did She Hulk introduce that concept previously, like obviously she was on dates and whatnot, but I think, yeah, to make it like a thing between two very high characters and one in particular people like really attached to in some deep ways, um, is gonna ruffle some feathers, but like, yeah, I don't see the real problem with it.
I
And to your
don't.
point,
There really isn't a
yeah,
problem with it. Shout out to Jesse Hassinger, friend of mine. He has written for many a publisher, but one of his gripes that I think he maybe wrote this for the AV Club, maybe like back in a couple years ago, uh, was this like how like sex is very foreign like in the MCU, and his specific example, which is true, and I never really noticed it till he pointed it out, was how like Ant-Man and the Wasp, like their whole thing is that they're not their whole thing, but a big part of them being a package deal is the fact that like they are in a relationship and like they are a couple, and how like there is a movie in the MCU called Ant-Man and the Wasp that is supposedly like partly centered around like Scott and Hope in their romance, and how like they barely even kiss in like all of their Marvel appearances and all of that sort of stuff. Which again isn't like that big of a deal to me either, but it's just a good example of like you have these two characters who a whole part of their dynamic is the fact that they are in a romantic relationship, and for a lot of their appearances like you they kind of just seem like buds. And like and that like that is very much like how the MCU has always played it. So it is kind of weird when you see like these two characters come in and they have like sparks immediately, and then they like just go for it, and it does
I
feel
mean,
really weird.
I will say if they didn't have like the chemistry they had, it wouldn't have been as like I don't give a fuck. Like I wouldn't have given a fuck. Honest, I'm
Yeah,
sorry, funny for the first words, but like I have like because they had that chemistry and it was like in several scenes, like back to back. It wasn't just like oh one
my
line.
gosh, when they were at the
It
bar
was
together, and I was just
yeah,
like,
I know. And so it's just like when she had the line like, or we could just skip dinner and then it cut to them like going to her house. It's like that worked because of how well they actually worked together. I think if it was like kind of then like okay, but I mean I think
yeah,
those
or would
two.
have felt forced or something. But it's like when we can feel the tension in like our living rooms, and it's like, yeah, they can clearly feel it. They when he like leaned over and did the little like, oh, he's like you, and I was just like, come on, Matt, you're better. You can you got better moves than that. But it worked. It worked for my guy. Um, okay, so we're good 30 minutes in here, about ish. Leapfrog. We talked about let's hop on over to Leapfrog. Welcome. Um, I also really loved Leapfrog. I'm really glad that in our Lord's year of 2022, we have a live action like Marvel product that features She-Hulk and Daredevil teaming up to defeat Leapfrog at
Yeah.
his hideout, the Lily Pad, which
I
slaps.
mean, even like 2019 in game.
Even just like 2 or 3 years ago, that would have been crazy.
I know.
Like that's insane that this is like an episode, and we all gathered around our TVs this morning to watch it. Like a bunch, like what's his face? Like FDR was giving a speech on the radio or something, you know, and
Yeah,
it's Leapfrog.
come a long
That's crazy.
way.
Um, his last name's Patilio. What? Not Eugene? No, is Eugene?
Yeah, yeah, one.
Um, yeah. So in the comics, um, let's hop into this. I'm gonna keep making. I'm gonna do all of these. Ribbit and rip it right into
That's a
here.
great line, though. I really enjoyed this.
It's so good. And it is true.
The
So it
guy who plays him, and I don't know his name. I'm sorry, but he was great. Like, I mean, they
yeah,
didn't
no,
like
he's good.
feel him at all. They had that little ad beforehand of like everyone trying out to be Leapfrog, and it was like cute and stuff. They had Kermit in it, but like that guy has not been like advertised as being part of the show. That actor, but oh my god, he was good. Like he was great.
I feel like this whole season has had a lot of that, where it's just like a bunch of like no name feels harsh, but like up and coming, or however you want to phrase it, like actors that don't have a lot of exposure, and they don't advertise them, and they don't talk about them that much, but then they come in and will just kill it as this like D-list Marvel villain and then disappear forever. And I'm like, I love that for you, because that's kind of my dream, is to my dream is to just play a Leapfrog and like one and then call it a day. Be like, yeah, I was Leapfrog in the MCU. I can sleep happy now. It was great. Um, yeah, Leapfrog is traditionally like a Daredevil in the world of Daredevil. Oh, in his earlier cheesier like yellow suited days, um, which is why I think again those little things I always appreciate. Like it is fun to see Daredevil in a yellow suit fight Leapfrog. I will say that they mentioned in the show that his dad is like an important. Do they ever specify? I don't remember fully. Did they ever like give him a name or specify what he does?
Know if they called him Vince or Vincent or whatnot. I think maybe once they have did, but maybe I just know it. But they did not harp on that. But it was interesting though, because I mean, in the comics, right? Vince was the original Leapfrog. He was like a super villain. He had money problems because he would invent a bunch of stuff and it never really checked out. And then he, made this cool little jumpy suit. So it's funny in the show how he's like this rich, very important client because that's not really what he was in the comics. But I did like how, I mean, they have this generational leapfrogginess, and I think when Eugene, the son, as we see, puts on this suit in the comics, he's not really leapfrog; he's frogman. It's very, very
Exactly.
different, very important. So interesting way they kind of blended that. I
Which
wonder
is
if that just, yeah,
fine.
because I don't know which name's like better, like in this case or
I
not.
like the name Leapfrog better specifically because it's hyphenated and it doesn't need like Frogman makes yeah,
Frog,
Leapfrog
I,
is hyphenated in the comics and Frogman is also hyphenated, I'm pretty sure. Is it not? Am I going
no,
crazy? I mean, I could
Frogman
be.
for sure is. I didn't know if leapfrog. I'm gonna Google it. It's fine.
I
Just keep
feel
going.
like I always remembered it being hyphenated and I thought that was funny. Maybe I'm crazy. Probably crazy.
You might. You're right. You're right. I was just making it one word in my head.
Yeah, and that always felt super unnecessary, which I loved. But yeah, like you were saying, Eugene Patilio is technically the second in the comics, is the second member of his family to don a
And
frog suit.
he was more of the hero
Mhm.
type. And he
He
wasn't like,
was like what they did in the show,
yeah.
which
And
which
he's
is he
kind of
was
like,
like
and
yeah
on the show we see him try to stop some robbers, and obviously he kidnaps
yeah
Jacob later and has a bunch of henchmen. So he's more villain, I would say, than superhero in the show. But so it is interesting how they melded those
mhm.
two, which I
It's
feel like
definitely an
Boomer's
amalgamation of both.
but
I say it's definitely an amalgamation
yeah.
of
But
both.
I wonder, because they had to go to some extent to come up with the his dad's an important client, not him. It felt like enough that they were going to bring it back in some way, but I don't know exactly how they would do that, at least in this season. But it
Would
felt like
be
they cared enough about the background to like include it. I don't know.
it would be really funny if like again they haven't done post credit scenes since like the fourth episode for whatever reason, but if like the finale happens and all the drama, which we'll get to in a second, but they resolve all of the drama that this episode sets up and they do all of this fun stuff. Um, and then they have a post credit scene where Jen gets like a knock on the door or there's something, and she like looks out of a window and sees that not only has Leapfrog returned, but there's two of them, and it's like him and his dad, and they're both in like ridiculous, and his dad's is like slightly dumber because it's older and like less high tech, and they're just like standing in the road like waiting to fight. Anyway, that's my pitch for the She-Hulk post-credit scene finale. Um, but yeah, so Leapfrog was really fun. I liked the way they did his suit and that they made him kind of an idiot. Um, we do meet. Well, we don't meet Jacobson, but we learn a lot more about Luke Jacobson.
And
Um, yeah, and he does. I do like what. How does Jen describe it? They have like a strained like a strained antagonistic relationship. I don't know. It's when they like make up at the end, and she's like, "I'm happy to be back in a strained yada 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 with you," and I was like, "That's funny."
I do remember he called her a greasy buffalo when she first went in to say, "Ooh, I have a client that was injured." I really appreciated that. It was funny. Yeah, so he was a major part of this episode, and he was essentially the entire hook of why Daredevil was involved, because he made it, which I feel like is something we like half theorized or talked about in the
It
past.
was well, since you brought it up, I was gonna find a way to circle back to this later because I thought about it too late. Um, you had brought up we were theorizing why Daredevil might be in LA. And the answer that we got in this episode is that Luke Jacobson called in a favor and that he was just, he does the whole speech about like sometimes I got to take on a big client. So for like the little guys back home, we get an allusion to Foggy and Karen, which is nice. Um, I really wasn't expecting him to even necessarily like hint at them, so it was cool for him to do that. But yeah, so that is why, and I also like that Luke Jacobson I like saying his whole name. I like that Luke Jacobson in like well being kidnapped was like very calm and collected about it, and then as soon as Daredevil and She Hulk showed up, he like knew like he was like like you guys are late. That was like his vibe, and then he just left. He walked out. and it made me, in my head, I like to think that this happens to him all the time. Like in his line of work, he just keeps getting kidnapped by ridiculous villains, and that like random Marvel heroes throughout time in like their off days that we don't see in the movies and stuff have just keep like rescuing Luke Jacobson, and he just knows. Like every time he gets kidnapped, he's like, "Well, it's gonna be like a couple hours, and then one of them will show up and get me out." Like he just knows that a superhero is gonna show up and break him out at some point. Um, I like that. I was laughing to myself about that while watching the episode, and I was like, "This is my new thing: is that Luke Jacobson gets kidnapped all the time, and he's constantly broken out by Earth's mightiest heroes, and it's just a good old time."
This is Hunter's other pitch of the
Mhm.
episode. Yeah.
This is just me pitching things now.
Yeah.
We talked about Leapfrog. We talked about Daredevil. We talked about Luke Jacobson, who I really like. We'll get into the end of the episode in a minute. But Mary, uh, we got something that I'm gonna need you to do a lot of talking for. And that is the fact that after a couple weeks away from like heavy courtroom stuff, we have a legal case. I mean, it didn't last very long. It was brief. It seemed pretty cut and dry, but there was like some fun stuff, and I would like to hear your take on the courtroom interactions between Jen Walters and Matt Murdock. And you can even bring in like during the I really liked during the fight in the lily pad in Leapfrog's lair when Jen was like trying to explain to Leapfrog like we can spin it this way, and then Matt was like no I'd spin it this way, and just like your thoughts on which one of them was right. And yeah, okay, lawyer.
Okay. Actually, it was fun because it was like straightforward. I mean, products liability law, relatively straightforward, annoying for a lot of people. Fun fact, it is not, there's like no federal law for it, so every state has to deal with it separately. So it's like just kind of messy across the
That's messy.
board, and different states do it differently. Jen does in her original meeting with Eugene say, oh, yeah, this is negligence and strict liability and breach of warranty. I have a problem with that because those are three different theories. So you go to different states, they might employ like one or a couple for different types of cases, but you can't just have all three. Like that just doesn't make any sense. Because negligence, first of all, as a general concept, means that there's like a standard of care that someone has to meet or not meet in order to like be liable. So like if you fall below like the standard of care necessary, you can be liable. Strict liability is it doesn't matter what you did if the result was, for example, a product faulty, whatever, like you're liable for it. Like it doesn't matter if you did everything you can at the best standard of care ever. So those are just not even, you can't have both. That was horrible. That was gross. And then breach of warranty is kind of its own thing, which is just like there's either an express like kind of, you know, paperwork with whatever product you have saying this is what it'll do, it won't break, blah blah blah, and then if it breaks, it breaches that. But there's often an implied breach of warranty. So sure, but she just lists all those, which is great. But like, you
Like
can't have all
as
that
if
going on.
the writers like looked up a few different words that had
Maybe.
to do with the
I
case and
mean,
like throw them on the paper. No one's
I
gonna notice.
appreciated that they like basically went through the very basics of it. Like I thought that was fun, but it's just like it doesn't make sense as a basic concept. But that's fine. Okay. So the courtroom scene one, they're not standing when they're talking to the judge. We're gonna bring that up again. I don't understand. But I'm sure it's easier to film. I don't know. The whole argument at that time was Jen wanted Luke Jacobson to like produce like a client list essentially, so she could go through and be like, oh, these people had issues too. That is for sure the right thing to do. Obviously, the point was Matt Murdock in this situation is a great lawyer and kind of beat her on that. And there's the whole like superheroes are important, so it's different for them. Right. You can redact shit. Like you still should be able to produce that in some form that you can like make the lawsuit happen. Because as she points out, it's very routine in those cases, like very normal. So the idea that you would just wouldn't produce any of that is just nonsense. And like judges have a procedure where they can look at it themselves and not show anybody else and like determine, okay, yes, someone can this bit of information, whatever, called in-camera review. But I'm just saying that was unrealistic, terrible judgery on that part. But like, I just, it was fun though. I mean, they used legal terms that were generally correct, even if they did not make sense at the same time. And I thought it was fun. To your point, okay, at the lily pad. Yeah, Jen was trying to explain to Eugene, please stop because you're just doing more crimes. And if you stop now, you'll have less crimes, maybe less prison
If you
time.
stop now, you'll have less crimes. I like phrasing it that way.
Yeah, and that's it. And I mean, she throws out, we can say it was, I mean, she just throws out like the term like manic episode or like mania or something, but then Daredevil slash Matt Murdock, legal drama fan over there, Daredevil, he is like, yeah, temporary insanity's like murky but not bad. And he suggests something like, I forgot what it was, but something that involved like undiagnosed PTSD. So that was the same theory. He was just like arguing with her on what would be a better like use of that theory.
Yeah, I think he uses the word like I would angle it more. Like
Yeah,
he doesn't necessarily say like that's wrong. It's just he's like this is how you should phrase it.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
So that was essentially what that was. I mean,
I was glad that someone in the room like because I not again not that I care because it's like a different kind of show, but it was funny to see Matt playing it so like fast and loose with his secret identity in that moment where he was just like throwing out lawyer. And granted, like 2/3 of the other named characters in the room already knew that he was Matt Murdock. Um, I assume that Luke Jacobson knows he's Matt Murdock, considering he
yeah,
called him to be his lawyer. Um,
big, big plus there. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. But it is so funny because like I'm so used to seeing him be so extra careful about it, and then he was just out there like doing lawyer talk, and then just to have Leapfrog be like, are you a lawyer? Like what's going on?" I was like, I'm glad they at least addressed it.
And in court, when he said something like, he's lying, don't ask how I know, I just know. And it was funny because the
Yeah,
judge went, yeah, we all know.
yeah.
But it was like, why make that comment? I mean, it was funny, but like,
Well, because again, that goes back to what I said earlier, where like the writers clearly knew, like this show is being written by people who watched to 2015 Daredevil and like knew because that was a thing like in that show, is he would like be in court and just be like, he's lying, and like no one would. They'd all just be like, that tracks for me, and then they'd like send the guy to jail. Which, to be fair, is also sort of how it happens in the comics a lot too. Like you just accept it with the storytelling and yada yada. But yeah, it was like he tried to do that like he's always does in the Netflix show, and they were like shut that down too, uh, which I thought was really funny. I almost like the idea that like those are the different vibes between New York and LA. Like in New York, everyone like takes it very seriously, and then he goes to LA, and they're like, "What country are you from? What's going on?" And he's just like, "Yeah, it's weird out here." It's like they don't know me out here. I can be fast. I'll do legal jargon while I'm fighting Leapfrog at the lily pad, and no one
that's
cares.
their Netflix Daredevil is New York Daredevil.
Yeah,
So your Daredevil is LA
it's
Daredevil.
not that he. It's not that Netflix isn't canon. It's not that this is a different Daredevil. It's just that he's in LA and things go different on the West Coast. I say that as a New York boy
What to say? I'm like, what are you?
who went
I
to
lived in
LA once
LA, the LA
and it
person.
was like different, in shows when they go somewhere that's like different and they do like a different color shading, so that's what it was like. I got off the plane in LA and I was like, it's different here. And the same thing happened to Matt Murdock, but that jet lag hit him funny. And and he just started being all weird about it.
As someone who has lived in LA and been to New York once, to be fair, yeah, I can. Yeah, it's very different. I would also be broody if I were in New York all the time, but that's just me. I'm a West Coaster, but
That's right, everybody. Surprise. We live on different coasts. East Coast,
we are
West.
so dedicated that we still make time for these videos despite a 3-hour time difference for
That's
you,
right.
the fans.
And if any of you guys watch my videos with Joe,
Oh God, yeah.
I got news for you. That guy lives in Austria. So you think scheduling West Coast, East Coast is difficult. The commitment for all 5 to 6 of you.
I'm
Anyway,
like 15 hours off from Charles B. I realized the other day. I'm like, oh my God. Does
yeah.
that count 9 or 15 at a certain point? I don't know. Like, do I go backwards? Do I go forward? Yeah.
Anyway, at
Or
Murphy's
again,
Multiverse, we are all over the place. Anyway, do you have anything before I switch
no, let's get
gears
to
here?
the end. I'm ready.
Okay, cool. So we've discussed the legal jargon. This episode, which took me by surprise, is longer than the other the others.
It felt a lot longer.
I think it's like 10 minutes longer, isn't it? It's like it's not. It's 20 something.
Maybe like at best 5 minutes longer, but I don't even think that. Usually they're like with credits like just over 30, I thought. And this one was like 35.
Interesting. Okay, yeah, it definitely felt a lot longer. But
Yeah.
Jen does make and maybe that's just because they purposefully wrote it so that there would feel like an ending. Um, and then
Yeah.
there's not because there's an extra bit, and Jen has a wonderful fourth wall break, where she, calls that out on the spot, and then they go to the. And you were right about this. The female lawyer of the year. That's where she wears the dress. And she goes there, and folks, things don't go according to plan. They don't go according to plan at all. In fact, they go very poorly. Um, Yeah, Mary, I feel like you had thoughts on this and you kind of like brought it up earlier and wanted to talk about it. So, what were your thoughts on the way this episode ended? I mean, Jen has her personal information hacked and thrown about on a screen for everyone.
Well,
And
first of all, shout out of appreciation to the Female Lawyer of the Year awards itself, which was like really, to be fair, like over dramatically sexist, but it was funny because like the themes were all very accurate as a
I thought it
female.
was funny that they awarded all of them. Like they're just
Yeah.
like all of you win.
Yeah.
Just like how patronizing it all was.
It feels like female lawyer. Yeah.
Oh,
So
the joke. Oh gosh, what's the terrible joke that guy makes? And it's only funny for the
they
face.
do all the work that lawyers do, but
Yes,
words and heels.
and I was cringing. I didn't start laughing until they cut and showed Jen's face, and
Yeah.
that was when it was
uh,
funny.
I was kind of caught off guard because I think, like off the weird people on the internet, a lot of their jokes about like sexism and like how women are treated are like on the nose. Like they're not like overdone for a point, but I do think this, for the most part, was a little overdone for the point. I think if that actually happened now in such like a
No, yeah, it would
big
not.
way, like people would call that out a bit more. Like that's pretty bad. But yeah, it was funny though. But okay, yes. So there she is on stage among the other female lawyers that exist. Yes. And
Including Mallory Book. We got a Mallory Book appearance, and we got a Pug appearance.
very briefly,
Three
yeah,
seconds.
sweet Pug. She mentions Bug too early on, but
Yeah.
little Pug. And yeah, and the Hulk King Intelligentsia gang. Clearly, as we know from Josh's weird little cliffhanger last episode, got all the information posted on the screen. Clearly, have videos of her having sex with, I think it was Josh, I assume.
I think it was. Yeah.
Yeah, and so for me, I was watching that. One, I had just watched Daredevil and all that fun shit, having a great time. I'm like, oh god, like that's terrible. So the contrast, I think, was really good because to your point, they set the stage with her fourth wall break because it was a little eerie. Like she was kind of like lighthearted, but there was something really off about it.
Because they show her feeling weird, like the
Yeah,
fact that
and it's
she
like
feels
no
off
music
about it.
underneath, and it's just like silent. So they really kind of set an eerie scene with that, which good. And then it was, and it's partly, I was watching it, I was writing the review, and I had the thought, like, I wonder how many men, and I don't mean this in a dramatic way, but how many, like, felt the same way I felt in terms of, like, the way they went after She-Hulk and got her as mad as they did and like took down someone who's invincible is with shit that's like historically and still like very much dedicated to harming women and like the type of stuff that like mostly harms women. Like if that same thing happened to a man, not as
Yeah.
those
I
are
don't. I mean,
damages to it. But like it's revenge porn essentially, and it's also just like sexual shaming. And I mean, obviously a general invasion of privacy, but there is like a very like guttural like stomach drop feeling for me because like that is like horrifying concept and like it is something that I think women have more of a fear of because like what I just said, I mean people react to it very
yeah.
worse ways for women. Like and that's just
Well, and I think that, I mean, for me, I'm sure I didn't like experience it in the same way that you did, but I definitely saw what they were doing, especially when like Mallory was saying like don't do it, like don't get angry. And it's like, okay, like I see what the plan was here, and I understand that. And to your point of, I truly fully believe like if someone leaked a man's sex tape on stage like that, it would not be
yeah,
as big of a deal. Like, and it's the language that Hulk King uses to. I mean, I forget exactly what he says, but he does like he is shaming her just for like sleeping with someone, which is not a crazy like. The thing is, none of the stuff that got put up on screen is like.
there was stuff of like Captain America's like I assume his ass 'cause it was like him from
Yeah,
behind.
it's none of it is anything where it's like you could like lose a career over it. Like, should lose a career over it. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's all just normal people stuff. Like, it's not like they put up she was like making deals with like criminals or like she was breaking these laws. It was literally just her like being goofy with friends and like getting laid. Like things that are not, they shouldn't matter at all. And it did. I did like I you know I if it was a dude up there, I feel like they would show the sex tape and people would be like, "Yo, that's crazy," and then
Yeah,
like they'd move on.
and that
But
was my point. It's like it's the type of activity is a weird word, but like you said, like it's stuff like normal people do. There's nothing like weird or like bad about what She-Hulk Jen did, but it is very much a for women, like that shit happens, you're probably losing your job. You shouldn't, but like that's how
yeah,
society kind of situations. And so I think I like commend the like intelligence of like the show in terms of like it is a larger metaphor for like women in society and because they know they have like one of the first like solo female adult women heroes like they're going for it and like that's like a great way to like symbolize how women can be like taken down in society in ways that men can't even if they are whatever. And I think the ending of course she gets into that very enraged state where she's less in control. And that's a callback to the first episode when her and Bruce were like talking about it. She's like, yeah, I do this all the time. So it's nice that like she does lose it because it's a little too easy for her. And that's fine too. But like, it's nice that that kind of comes back around. And then, of course, the theme of she's immediately like the enemy, villain, whatever to everybody around her. You got
yeah. Was that
control.
yeah? Was it damage control?
I assume. I don't think I didn't see anything.
Just the fact that
They were already there.
they were already there.
Yeah.
Like they and I would have to assume that they knew, okay, She-Hulk is going to be here for this award, and we just have to assume something could happen.
Yeah,
So
or
they
I'm
were like
that
on
like
site.
intelligentsia group like went into some. I don't know. I don't know if they'll explain it or not. But yeah, they're very
They
clear.
probably won't, but
There.
based on what we saw in Miss Marvel, it seems like they just track like
They,
superhuman. Yeah, and we kind of skipped past it earlier, but like there's no Sokovia Accords anymore, so no one like
what sense? What were they doing with Miss Marvel? Good God, like what? What
yeah.
law?
So now it's even more like, okay, so if there's no Sokovia Accords, like when did those get repealed? And
First of all, what was the point? I love Civil War. I love that movie. But like we did
yeah,
so the Marvel Studios did so
Sokovia
little
Accords feel like
with
a very rare example of like the MCU introducing something that at the time they introduced it, they felt like was gonna be a thing they were gonna play with for a while, and then just very quickly realized it wasn't the story they wanted to tell,
Yeah.
and just had to like figure out a way around it. And I think that they got very lucky that the story they wanted to tell ended up including the blip, and that it becomes this like easy scapegoat when you want to get rid of anything. So you just be like, the blip changed everything, and now we don't feel like we need the Accords anymore.
But I think we've kind of talked about the blip also feels differently than the Sokovia Accords, but also feels like something they like wanted for this particular situation that they're like, we hope people don't care about it too much, which is different. But
But
yeah,
they did more like the blip. They still did like the almost every Phase 4 project at least like referenced the blip, after it happening. But like the Sokovia Accords, they used it as a plot device in Civil War, which it was fine and worked, and then just like never brought it up ever again. In fact, again,
I
I know
think
that
it's
our site doesn't have the best relationship with Agents of Shield fans. To clarify, I like that show, which is why I know this. Agents of Shield did more with the Sokovia Accords than like the rest of the MC. Sorry, guys, the actual MCU ever like has.
actually we're gonna come.
Because like when they were playing with it, they were like, "Oh, this is like a thing we can play with on our show now," because the writers considered themselves part of the MCU up until like the last 2 seasons. Um, and even they even tried to explain, it's a whole thing. But like there was a whole season where like all of the drama revolved around Quake, Chloe Bennett's Daisy Johnson. Like they wanted her to sign the Sokovia Accords, and then she wouldn't. And so whenever she was like out using her powers as Quake, like the government was after her, and it was this whole thing. And that like Agents of Shield played with that concept more than any like that specific type of storyline that you would expect to come from the Sokovia Accords like never really happened after Civil War, which is interesting to me.
Um, I'm not.
Okay, well Mary's gone. Oh
Well,
wow.
I think we should talk about what we think is the finale.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, I I feel like we knew that whatever this like intelligentsia Hulk King scenario was gonna like that has to be at least partially like I knew they were gonna address it. Um, I truthfully wasn't expecting this ending or like this to be the route that it was going. Um, I don't know. I mean, I think it's gonna be a lot like Miss Marvel's finale in that I think it's gonna be a lot of like welling tensions, and then at the end it's like they resolve. Like I think by the end, I think Jen won't still be Public Enemy #1. I think they'll find a way around it, and she'll be fine, and she'll be back lawyering, and the status quo will be less sort of how it was. Yeah, I don't know. It's got to be Hulk King, and like I don't know. I had all these theories about like the Wrecking Crew coming back and yada yada, and I thought maybe like Abomination would play more of a role in the end and all this stuff. But now it feels like those storylines are pretty much done thus far.
Yeah.
Because I don't know how you bring like all of that other stuff back. And to be fair, I don't necessarily think that they need to because again I say this every show that we've done. If they want, this is a perfect show to give a season two, multiple seasons. Like it feels like it's designed to have multiple seasons, and if you're gonna do that, we don't need every little thing to come circling back, which is fine. Um, yeah, I don't know. I feel like I'm grasping at straws here. Like I had all these ideas, and now I'm not sure, and I still think we got to figure out Intelligentsia, and we got to figure out Hulk King. I still would like it to be the leader. The leader still makes the most sense to me, but this show does do a lot of like you expected one thing and we're doing another. So who's to say? Who's to say?
Um, I think
Who's to say?
because normally, like this episode, ultimate episode of a season, whatever, would really set up the finale. And like this did in the end, just in terms of like literally what's happening. But like that kind of underlying Hulk King intelligentsia thing, we don't know that much about. Like we have obvious ideas about it, but like there's not like really specific things that are going on that she has to deal with. And maybe they'll show up. But I honestly didn't know if the finale would be like a thing until like the end of this episode kind of thing. Like it just maybe it was just another one off ish episode.
Yeah.
Like but I think now, we've seen her kind of at a low point. So I don't know if she's gonna have to redeem herself in some way, or if we're gonna like get more into the whole King thing. And like you said, there were so many other things that could have come back. Like Bruce went out in space. Is he gonna come back?
He's
We
just
don't
in
know. Like,
space.
yeah. And so I think the like general Hulk plot MCU wide that we've talked about, I think that'll have to be mentioned or half set up in some way. But I don't know if
Yeah.
that'll just be like
I
a
think
post credit scene or the equivalent. I don't know. I
the
truly don't
MCU in
know.
general is just very difficult in the sense that, like, sort of like what you just said, like, because of the nature of the MCU, we never know what plot lines that are like introduced in a project are plot lines that are meant to be wrapped up in that project, or if it's something they set up for something else. Like when Bruce goes to space, like we don't truly know, okay, is he coming back and this is gonna be like a She-Hulk plot line later in the season, which now we know it's probably not unless they do a ton of stuff in the finale with it. Or is he going off to space and they're setting up him appearing in another project somewhere else? Like he could be in Guardians of the Galaxy 3 for all we know. Like who knows? Um and that does make it really difficult because it's just like it's the same with the Wrecking Crew. It's like I would like to assume that we got a little bit more information on those guys and their whole vibe like later in the same season. And I still do think that I with as comic accurate as a lot of this has been, I mean, I know not all of it was super comic accurate. I feel like Marvel at least knows like people were expecting the Wrecking Crew to be like big and jacked, and maybe they'll never do that, and it's just part of the subversion of everything, and like Leapfrog being goofy and the Retreat guys being goofy and yada yada yada. But I just assumed like, yeah, people are trying to get her blood. Like this makes sense that they would come back later in the season and like get Hulk blood and it'd be a whole thing. But now I'm like, that could hypothetically still happen, but who knows? Maybe we're gonna see the Wrecking Crew in like a different show or movie or whatever. I don't you I'm sure you still believe that Josh is Thunderball, so
That's true. I do. That's true. If I'm right, that kind of has to be like mentioned.
yeah, because I would assume that if Josh isn't Thunderball, that I don't he's not popping up anywhere outside of She-Hulk, and it feels like he has to come back in the finale in some way.
Yeah. I will say, I feel like of all of series, I was gonna say Phase 4 series, but that's the only series we have. Um, this show is like the least explicitly plot driven, obviously, so
Yeah,
there's not like a very clear ish ending. Like Miss Marvel, we knew what it was going to have to deal with, and same with WandaVision, more or less, and like all of that.
I think
Loki,
that with a lot of those shows, we already knew what their next appearance was going to be, except for Moon Knight. So this is like Moon Knight and She-Hulk are the two where we know they're probably going to show up again in the MCU, but we don't know where or how. So that leaves the finale a lot more open ended.
yeah, I did not like Moon Knight's finale. You were there,
I
but
know.
I so hopefully it's not the same. But to be fair, I feel like Moon Knight, maybe it was a lot of me too, but like set up potentially a lot more, like very specific types of things that I just didn't do. So, but as She-Hulk, I like have no real expectations or like theories or thoughts. So it's a little different.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I had a pretty solid idea of what the finale could hypothetically be, and now I'm not so sure. I do think that a lot of those ideas could still come true. I just no longer am certain that they are like the thing that needs to happen like I once thought they were. So I don't know, but I am excited because this is this show is less plot driven, but I kind of like that about it. I like that different thing, and I think that more one-off episodes suit the character and the style they're going for a lot better. But it does now seem like they are going for some sort of finale vibe with the last one. So I don't know. I don't know if I necessarily expect it to be as like grand and intense as like it could be. They might even resolve it in the first like 10 minutes, and the second 10 minutes are like a different one-off story, like who's to say.
Yeah.
Um but I think it'll be fun because the show's been fun throughout. And I'm hoping that I at least enjoy it. I just want to enjoy it in the same amount I've enjoyed the rest of the show. I think that's my where I'm at with it.
Want that for you too.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate that a lot. I'm almost sad it's over. Like I've really enjoyed watching She-Hulk. What even is the next?
Secret Invasion, but series. I mean,
Is it really?
next. Well, Werewolf by Night is tomorrow. Um,
At the time we record
and
this, yes.
yeah, and then true, yeah, and then Black Panther 2 and Secret Invasion, unless they have a surprise one. Yeah.
Well, is there anything else specifically you would like to discuss?
I don't think so.
I feel like we covered it. We got in there. We dug deep, found some stuff, and then we riveted and ripeted it, which was is very exciting. Um, yeah. So with that, thank you guys for tuning in, sticking around, hanging out for a bit with your old pals Hunter and Mary, and I hope you enjoyed the Daredevil episode. Um, I hope you enjoy the finale. I say this all the time, and people don't. But you guys have finale theories or ideas. If you're watching this, if anyone's out there, taps Mike in like apocalyptic bunker. Just like if anyone's out there, please see you guys
Okay.
next week. I'm tired. I'm gonna go to bed, guys. I'm literally like imagine you're here and I click this. I'm gonna go. Literally sitting next to my bed. I'm just gonna go.